Hi everyone. With me, I'm Tal Morgenstern, Chief Product Officer for Vulcan Cyber. With me is Amber Smith. Amber, if you want to say hello.
Oh yes. Hi, my name is Amber Smith. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay. My name is Amber Smith. I'm in cybersecurity and data governance here at Snowflake. So I'm pretty much the one that's driving Vulcan at Snowflake.
Great. And today we're going to talk about how to do risk-based prioritization with Vulcan. Okay. So as we talked before, our vulnerability maturity model, the first stage is the reactive stage, where you just kind of gather all the information and quickly react and respond to new vulnerabilities. And today we're going to focus on the second stage, the data-driven stage, where you can take all the data that you have and make smarter decisions on how to prioritize and remediate vulnerabilities. So the data-driven stage has three integral parts to it. One is looking at the asset management, basically knowing, understanding your environment, understanding what vulnerabilities needs to be addressed, and understanding the scope of the environment and making sure you have full coverage of the environment. The second stage that we're going to talk at length is the risk-based management and how to do proper risk-based management for vulnerability remediation. And lastly, the exclusion or exception management. Not all vulnerabilities are created equal, and not all of them need to be resolved in prompt time. So there is different methodologies on how you could exclude or ignore certain vulnerabilities. So what is eventually the goal of a vulnerability management program? It's to reduce risk. In order to reduce risk, we need to remediate vulnerabilities. Usually we have more vulnerabilities than we can handle, and they come in bursts. We don't control the appearance and the discovery of new vulnerabilities, so they discovered all the time, and we need to remediate them. Therefore, we must prioritize them. In order to prioritize vulnerabilities, we need to quantify the risk to understand which vulnerabilities are the most riskiest to our environment. So first, we need to look at the vulnerability, understand the technical severity, understand the technical implications of the vulnerability. Then we can use external factors like threat intelligence to understand how this vulnerability is being exploited in the wild and how it's being used. And lastly, determine the business impact. What would happen if someone would exploit this vulnerability in our environment, and how risky it is going to be for our organization, for our business. Risk is not a CVSS score. CVSS score has been an integral tool in vulnerability ranking for a very long time, but it doesn't actually stand for risk. It's kind of an objective reflection of the technical implications of a vulnerability. But actually, in real life, the risk derives from the risk of the vulnerability, which is one aspect, the actual threats, and the impact to the environment. So this is real cyber risk. Just a couple of examples to make this more real. So you see three different vulnerabilities that have been recently discovered. Cgrid, which is a vulnerability in DNS server remote, dubbed as a potentially wormable vulnerability for Windows environment. Boot hole, which is a boot driver vulnerability, cross-platform impacts every Linux distro, every Windows distribution. And lastly, SMB bleed, which has high severe impact on Windows domain environments and Windows closed environments, where potentially remotely exploitable inside the environment and can facilitate lateral movement as well. You can see each of those get a different CVSS score. All of them have potential exploits that can be used and are known in the wild. But each one of them could have different impact on your environment. If you don't have a Windows environment, then you don't really need to worry about SMB bleed or Cgrid for that matter. And with boot hole, it really depends on what kind of mitigation factors you have. So there's a lot of considerations to that, and it really depends on the business context and the business implications that are attached to the vulnerable assets. And eventually, business context is the key. You need to understand what will happen if this vulnerability would be exploited, and compare that to the attack surface. And it's a lot of work because the business is always changing, especially in large dynamic environments for technology companies, or other different companies for that matter. And for that, I have Amber here that can show us how Snowflake is utilizing Vulkan and how they do their vulnerability management program together with Vulkan to prioritize vulnerabilities accordingly.
Yeah. Thanks.
Amber, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Tal. That's a really great explanation. If you just can keep sharing your screen for just one moment, I want to just kind of touch on that diagram. As you may or may not be aware, Snowflake is a cloud data warehouse company. Pretty much we are a very cool tool that allows you to aggregate all of your data into one spot using SQL and then display analytics all over the place. So as you can imagine, Snowflake is, at the core of it, is data driven. So that's why management program. We use similar to Vulcan, how they use like risk-based prioritization. We do the same at Snowflake. We prioritize our risk from critical, high, low. But what we found was when we were using our traditional tools, our scanning tools, it was very hard to really dissect what we needed, what our engineers really needed to work on, because there are hundreds of vulnerabilities out there, all are high, all are critical, but there was really not an easy way to interface that to our engineers and also tell the story to auditors or management so that we can paint a clear picture. So we tried to kind of use Snowflake originally with our scanning tools to kind of bridge that gap. But it was still hard to kind of do the legwork of really explaining and seeing how we want to visualize our vulnerabilities, and that's where Vulcan kind of like played a key role. So I can start to share my screen, if you will. Okay. So here we are in, this is just a Vulcan demo instance. So I promise you these aren't our vulnerabilities in Snowflake. But one thing that's really crucial for us with using Vulkan is our ability to really just dissect and pinpoint what we need to work on at any given time. We do that through our business group filtering. So here, it's easy to make these filterings yourself. I felt like in other tools, it was hard for us to really pinpoint and separate the different deployments, because in Snowflake we work off of deployments in different regions, so we scan each region for our deployments. So we're able to kind of create different business groups per each deployment and kind of get a snapshot of each deployment, or we're able to just kind of create a all-encompassing filter to kind of grab everything, so that we can get a total view here. And as Tal mentioned before, we can kind of approach this in two ways from a risk-based perspective, a risk prioritization perspective. The first way here is through our settings, and you can kind of define your risk priority weights here, and also adding your Python scripts here. At Snowflake, what we employ is actually the feature where we can go in to the business groups themselves and just select the business groups here. And I'm assuming that if you're not familiar with what I'm going through with Vulkan right now, then I'm pretty sure anybody on the team can kind of help you with that. But I'm just kind of fast forwarding to the specifics. But if we go into our particular business groups, we can kind of see this impact, and we can kind of select whether or not this is a low, normal, or high impact business group. So for example, within Snowflake, we have, customer environments that we know that if there's a vulnerability, we want our engineers to focus on those environments first, our government environments first as well. And then all our other environments are normal. And then like our dev environments, our test environments are considered low. So we can kind of use that model here, and we can kind of select, if we want to say this is a low, we can easily, add that tag there and then go into our vulnerabilities. And then once we're able to see our vulnerabilities here, we can select the vulnerability, and we can see here it has this high impact tag. Now for this particular business group, the Snowflake webinar, I've made that a high impact tag. So off the bat, if an engineer is going into a vulnerability, they can clearly see that this is a high impact area, so they should prioritize it first. In addition to that, there's so many other ways to kind of filter out and kind of play with the different ways to kind of grab data from Vulkan. The interface is so easy to use, just with the ability to add custom filters for searching, in addition to if you want to search by CVSS. If you want to export a list, so recently an engineer asked me like, hey, can you just give me a list of all the vulnerabilities and the impacted assets? I can just export this list to a CSV file to just send it straight to them, because sometimes they like it old school that way. Or I can take action here and email it to them. And then, if you have connectors where you're connecting it via Jira, what have you, you could connect it and automatically create a Jira ticket.
Amber, maybe you could expand on who is using Vulkan, and how are you working with other teams in Snowflake with Vulkan data?
Yeah, that's a good segue to what I was going into next. So from my perspective as the security compliance professional in Snowflake, I deal primarily with our cloud engineering team. So how I use Vulkan on a regular basis is kind of monitoring our vulnerabilities, kind of seeing what's flagging, seeing what our SLAs are. And I'm kind of like the first line of defense when there are issues coming up. We have like weekly status meetings to kind of go over what's happening from our vulnerability management perspective. And so our cloud engineering uses this tool to kind of see what they can what they would like to they can remediate at that time. So they can go in here and search by assets, and they can go in here and search by whatever they would like. In addition to that, we also have our data analytics teams that utilizes this Snowflake connector. So if you actually have a Snowflake account, you can actually connect your Snowflake instance to Vulkan, and you can send over the data that you have feeding into Vulkan into Snowflake. And so what our data analytics team has been able to do is kind of create as I said before, at Snowflake, we're a big data-driven company. So we have been able to kind of create, we have what we call like a continuous monitoring dashboard system. So everything that we use at Snowflake, we monitor through our dashboard. So everything from our training, everything from our cloud accounts. And so we've been able to kind of pull the Vulkan data into Snowflake itself and create that kind of dashboard. So if I can just share that really quickly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so this is kind of like a high level dashboard, and this is what our data analytics team has used to create this dashboard. And then, you know, our management team looks at this and they can kind of see like kind of quick snapshot what's going on. So what we have here, the first level, we kind of break it down into levels. So we have the first level of like what's the overall score of our program for our vulnerability management. And so this is kind of telling us that basically 94% of our servers are, you know, compliant with an SLA. There are about 6% of servers that are out of SLA. And so we try to stay within a certain number in order to stay compliant overall. And then if you go down to level 2, it kind of gives you a trends and patterns view of like kind of what we're looking at over the next 12 months and like quick numbers of what we would like to see from a managerial perspective. And so when they're looking at this, they can clearly see like how many we have open, what was closed. And in addition to one feature that was really a game changer with Vulkan was the ability to risk acknowledge vulnerabilities and do that through their system. And then we can feed that back into to Snowflake. So from that, we can kind of see our open vulnerabilities over time and kind of how we've been doing and trending. And then we can kind of see some numbers of how we're doing, like how long does it take us to close some vulnerabilities on average, how many days past SLA we have on certain vulnerabilities. And again, this is demo data, so take this with a grain of salt. And then level 3, it kind of gives you some details. Go ahead.
Wow. Yeah. No, Amber, that's a lot of data. How many data points are you pulling from Vulkan?
Yeah. So we have a really great. The Vulkan team did really great in kind of giving us a list of all the data points that we've been able to kind of pull from Vulkan. And so I think we were able to pull numerous amounts of data points. And if you can see my screen here, I won't go through them all, but this kind of gives you a list of whatever you'll be able to pull from Vulkan at any time through your Snowflake account. And this gives you the ability to really just play with your whole vulnerability management program or any type of program that you're feeding into Vulkan. I think Vulkan also does a great job of, you know, showing some of the data themselves as well. But if you really, you know, that's how Snowflake works in general. So, you know, that's our prerogative, but you're able to get tons of data points there as well, and to show your data however you would like to show it.
That's good. If you don't have Snowflake yet, get one. It's one of the greatest. You know, SaaS data warehouse. Yeah. It's an amazing concept.
Yeah.
Cool. So thank you very much, Amber.
Yeah, sure. And if I could just ask you a quick question, how are you guys able to, I guess, how would you like your customers to use your risk-based prioritization model?
Yeah, sure. So the way you do that is great. I think there's endless options, because every enterprise has different needs, different requirements. They work in different environments, so that also takes a toll on how you manage your risk. So we support different varieties from assigning specific risks to groups of assets, to actually deploying custom risk scripts. You can create your own risk formula with Python, if you need, and you can augment only minor things in the Vulcan risk score. Really depends on the needs of the organization. The fun part is that everything comes pre-baked. You just deploy it, you connect your integrations, and you get all the data streams, and you can tweak as time goes by. And we see many customers that are evolving and changing and adapting their risk score according to the changing environments of their business. But yeah, it's the short answer. It's different everywhere. Okay, let me move to the. So to sum it up, vulnerability management is not easy. There's certain gaps in the there's certain gaps in the audio. Okay. There could be gaps in the visibility. You need to get all your tools into one place and kind of see of the vulnerabilities. You need to make sure that your scanning results are correct, that everything is found, and not all vulnerabilities are created equal. So you really need to examine the output of all the tools and what they mean for your environment. And then lastly, some remediation processes are really complex, as Amber showed. Maintaining that 96% level is really hard. It's day in, day out struggle that I know the team is doing to kind of keep these high levels of compliance. And it's a lot of work with the different teams of the organization to make sure that everything stays aligned. With that.
Okay, thank you, Tal. Thank you, Amber, so much for joining us on this session and for sharing the demo as well as some insights into how we view vulnerability prioritization from a risk perspective at Vulcan. Very insightful. We appreciate your time and your insights here.